Hi, I'm Michelle with the Texas Book Festival. In October 2021, FS1 sports analyst and New York Times #1 bestselling author Emmanuel Acho discussed his latest book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy, with some of our Real Reads friends. Real Reads is a Texas Book Festival program that provides opportunities to teens to engage with dynamic authors and their work. In this conversation, Emmanuel answers questions about his inspiration for writing his book and speaks to what he hopes folks will take away from reading and reflecting on it. We are delighted to bring you this conversation. I hope you enjoy it.
It's good to join everyone today. It's good to join everyone. So I went to a all predominantly white, a really wealthy private school in middle school. I had to wear a uniform growing up, y'all, and I went to an all boys school. So there were no girls, women, young ladies, none of that in my school. It was just all boys. We wore a uniform, just yeah. That. And so in my experience, I oftentimes heard, well, Emmanuel, you're black, but you're not really black. I didn't really know what that meant because I was looking at myself as 11 and 12, and I was like, I look black. They would say, Emmanuel, you don't talk like you're black, or you don't dress like you're black, or you don't act like you're black. And I didn't know what that meant. I had like an identity crisis because in my mind, I knew I was black, but to this group of white students at my school, I wasn't black enough. And so I wanted to write Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy because what I was going through in my school, I know so many other students across the world are now experiencing as they are 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on. So it wasn't enough just for me to write Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black man, but I really had to take myself back to when I was 10, when I was 11, because I so desperately wish that somebody helped educate my white colleagues as to like why that was so rude. Somebody helped educate my white friends as to like how they were hurting me as a young Black boy. And I also wish that somebody was teaching me as a young Black boy why that wasn't okay. So I knew it wasn't right, but I couldn't verbalize why it made me feel how it made me feel. So I wanted to write Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy just to make sure others didn't necessarily have to suffer like I did. So first, I wrote Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black man, and I partnered with Oprah Winfrey, and we wrote that book, and it debuted at #3 on the New York Times bestsellers list. And Matthew McConaughey, this famous celebrity actor, he was #1. And there was another book called Humans of New York, and that was #2. And so we realized that this book is really doing a lot for an adult audience. But I believe if you want to change a tree and the branches, and really you should touch the root. And the children are the roots of our future. So rather than fixing broken men and broken women, you should just work on healing younger children. And as a society, I know we so often focus on the adults, but really it's the children that are the next generation. So the process was taking my adult version book and using examples from childhood that children can appreciate, that children can respond to. You know, I talk about what is cultural appropriation, and I talk about citing your sources. And I know so many students, y'all know because your teachers tell you, if you write a paper and you use a quote, and you use a quote from online, and I remember using quotes because if your teacher says it has to be 500 words and you only got about 200 words in you, you got to borrow some words from somebody else. But if you write a quote and you put it in your paper, you have to cite your sources. And so the process was just going back to that younger age and trying to give stories and analogies and examples that I know children and young adults and adolescents can all appreciate and learn from. I think the biggest takeaway from the book is it's a tool, right? If you've ever tried to build something in your house or fix something in your room, or if your game console behind you breaks down, you need the right tool to fix it, right? Like if you're trying to screw something into the wall, you got a TV mounted up. You can't screw something into the wall with a hammer. You need a screwdriver. You need some screws. And so if you're trying to fix this racial insensitivity and this racial ignorance, because I don't believe that the majority of the world is racist. I believe that the majority of the world, our world, America, is racially ignorant and racially insensitive. And I think there is a difference there. If you're trying to fix this racial insensitivity and this racial ignorance, then you need the proper tool to do so. American history is an autobiography. It's not necessarily a biography, right? It's written by white people about white people. And if you let me write my book about myself, I'm going to be as nice as I possibly can. I'm going to be the smartest student ever, the best looking, the best athlete, the best on TV. But if somebody else writes it, it might be a little more accurate and a little more truthful. So what can people take away from my book is just another tool to what is that Black experience, at least for my shoes, really like. And I take a lot of historical voices and I take a lot of data so you understand it's not just one person's experience, but you're going to learn in my book. I use a real question, somebody like you, at the beginning of every chapter. I use a real question that I was either emailed or direct messaged or texted, and I proceed to answer that question. So it's really just a conversation like the one we're having about 15 to 20 large scale topics to help as a tool to dismantle racial ignorance. So many people say that, they're colorblind. And while being colorblind is like a good intention, it's a terrible thing. If you and I were to walk outside after a rainy day and I were to point to the sky and say, "Oh, do you see that rainbow?" And you say, "Emmanuel, no, I don't see it. I don't see color." That would be so ignorant, because it's not that you don't see color, you see color. We just need to appreciate each and every color that we see. People started to say, "I don't see color," essentially to imply, I'm not racist, I don't see color. But I want you to see color. Your color should be appreciated, just like mine should be appreciated, just like everything that makes Emmanuel unique. That should all be seen. It just should not be devalued. It shouldn't be criticized. So it's important to see color, because I always say, you can't fix a problem you don't know exists. Denial, spelled Denial, don't even know I am lying. And as long as people say, "Oh, I don't see color," then they don't even realize they're lying to themselves about what might exist in their own minds. The takeaways depends on the reader. I think if I was reading this, if I can go back to my age, my first read, my biggest takeaway is understanding I'm worthy, I'm valuable, I am Black. If I'm Black, I'm Black by skin color. Now, there are different aspects of culture. I grew up Nigerian. My parents were born and raised in Nigeria. And so while Black by skin color, I grew up Nigerian cultured, but I'm Black as can be. And I understand that there's a difference between color and culture. I think my hopeful takeaway for young white students is you can be emotionally killing your Black and brown friends and your friends of color, even if you don't mean it. When you say things like, you're like an Oreo, Black on the outside, white on the inside, because they don't sound hood, or they don't sound gangster, they don't sound violent. Or when you say to your Hispanic colleagues, you're like a coconut, brown on the outside, white on the inside, because they talk educated, or they talk with well-mannered, or they talk very proper. So I think my biggest takeaways are, let's make sure that we're not hurting the feelings of our friends, because we don't mean to, but we might be doing it unintentionally, because my Black friend doesn't sound like the hip hop rapper that I see on TV. So to me, he's not Black. My Black friend talks proper, so I'm going to call him white. No, 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 no. That's not the way this works. If your Black friend is Black by color, your brown friend is brown by color, then because they talk educated, because they talk intellectually, that doesn't mean they're white. Because imagine what that's saying. What that's saying is, to be intelligent is to not be Black. What that's saying is, to dress proper is to not be Black. What that's saying is, to enunciate and talk with a wide variety of words is to not be Black. So to be Black is to be unintelligent, to be uneducated, and to dress improperly. So I think my biggest takeaway is to just make sure that you are being kind and being smart enough to know how to be kind. Um, systemic racism. Um, Man, and it'd be like me asking you, how would you explain American football in a minute and a half? All right, let me answer this as best as possible. I would say that systemic racism is it's race. Simply put, obviously, it's racism that we don't even understand is built into the society that we live in. It's racism that we don't even understand still exists around us and exists in us. For example, again, I went to the number one private school in Texas, St. Mark's School of Texas. Texas, as we all know, it borders Oklahoma. As intelligent as a school as I went to, why did I never learn about the Tulsa race riots? Tulsa race riots was when Black Wall Street was, I won't say the word eviscerated, but it was eviscerated. I'll lower it down. When Black Wall Street was essentially burned down by a group of white people. And I never learned about that as a young Black man growing up. I had no idea Black Wall Street existed. But why did I never get taught that when I literally went to the best school in Texas for education? Because I think systemically, we just didn't teach things that we probably should have taught. Because based upon the system of our education, based upon the systems that are in play, we just ignore certain things that add value based upon race. I think systemic racism is understanding that we don't hire the best person for the job. You know, if you're at recess, right, and you're the captain, and so you get to pick your recess team, you might not necessarily pick the best player. You're gonna pick your best friend. Right? You're gonna pick your best friend, him and her, and him and her. You're not necessarily going to pick the best player. That's what we do in our hiring and firing system as adults. We hire based upon what's called nepotism. We hire our family, or we hire based upon what's called cronyism. We hire our friends. And so historically in America, if white men have been in hiring and firing positions, and they, like me and you at recess, they don't pick the best person, they pick the person they closest friends with, then our white people historically will hire white people who historically will hire white people. And now systemically, although in 2021, it's not as though we are racist, it's just the system in place has caused for racism. So essentially systemic racism is like you and I at recess picking our friends instead of picking the best person for the job. I loved Austin. I loved Austin. I didn't leave Austin until last year when I moved from Austin to Los Angeles. And I was in Austin from 2008 to 2020. Whenever I was in the NFL playing for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Cleveland Browns, I would come back to Austin every summer just because I loved it that much. I tried to stay away from 6th Street. Y'all don't need to know about 6th Street yet. For those that are too young, don't ask. And for those that are too old, don't go. But Austin is an amazing city that does amazing things. And I think that Austin is just one of the best cities in the world, Dudley. Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. I really wrote that for kind of adults and maybe like 17, 18 up. Like that is the meat and potatoes of like, hey, let's figure out what's going on in our society. We all want to make the world a better place. Well, how can we do that? I answer those tough questions like, well, why can Black people say the N-word, but white people can't? What is white privilege, Emmanuel? I'm struggling with that. I don't have white privilege. I had to work hard as well. Again, I say white privilege isn't saying that your life hasn't been hard. It's just saying that your skin color hasn't contributed to the difficulty in your life. Obviously, as a white person, your life has been hard. As any person, life has been hard. I answer those questions that we've all faced as we've entered into adulthood and navigating adulthood. And we talk about, well, what about Black on Black crime in Chicago? Then we talk about some real things, the tip sheet at the end. Okay, let's talk about Black women's hair. How come they refer to each other, Black people, as kings and as queens? Let's talk about so many things. Why do Black men wear these caps and these little do-rags on their head? What is a do-rag? Like we go there. And I think that everything great is birthed through discomfort. And Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man is really a conversation that every adult, 16, 17 and up, need to read. Let's talk about real history, not just the history that we've read in our curriculum growing up. Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy, man, that's just so helpful for our youth. I really wish every kid read that book because we don't understand the damage that's done when you hear you're like an Oreo, black on the outside, white on the inside. Like that's really damaging. And when I first put that up, some Asian friends of mine responded to my post and said, I heard I was like a banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside. Hispanic friends said, I heard I was like a coconut, brown on the outside, white on the inside. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just Black people. But I was like, wait a second, all my friends of color or non-white friends are dealing with this. So in Comfortable Conversations with a Black Boy, I wanted to dismantle racial ignorance and racial insensitivity before it gave birth to full-fledged racism. Again, we try to fix adults, but why not just mend and tend to children? So that's the primary difference. So the most fun I ever had playing football was in high school. The most fun. I played in college at the University of Texas back when Texas was good. We went to a national championship versus Alabama. Let's get it twisted now. It's two different Texases, y'all. It's two different Texases. I played in Texas when we was nice. Okay, we started off 26-2 my first 2 years. We ain't gonna talk about those last two. But those first 2 years, we was nice. But it became a business when I got to college. In high school, you played for the fun, the love of the game, like recess with your friends. But then when you got to college, now you're worried about going to the NFL. When I got to the NFL, it was cool. You know, I was playing with the likes of Deshaun Jackson and LaShawn McCoy, future, Hall of Fame players, playing against Tom Brady and Eli Manning, Odell Beckham's rookie year. I was in Philadelphia when Odell was with the Giants. When he made the three-finger catch, we had to play him a few weeks later. So like, it was fun, but it was so grueling and so tiring and so tough. So my time in football shaped me and made me into the person I am. But it was trying. It was difficult. I firstly remembered, and I asked myself, there was a question that Oprah asked me, and Oprah, for those that don't know, younger on this call, she was a mega maven. She was maybe the greatest speaker of our generation. And she asked me, she said, Emmanuel, what is your intention? It's the first question she asked me. I said, Oprah, my intention is to change the world, and I truly believe I can. So while writing this book, I remembered, who was I writing it for? And I wasn't writing it for me. I was writing it for you all. And I said, what do people need to hear? And I said, if I'm writing it for you all, then I should speak to you all. So I took questions, and I got maybe 5,000 emails, and I would read them all, and I would flag the most common. And then I would use that as a question to kick off a chapter. So if the most common questions were about the N-word, because, well, my son listens to the N-word and it's in rap music. So if Black people say it and put it out there and my son is rapping along, is that a problem? I got common questions about privilege. I got questions about reverse racism. I got questions about cultural appropriation. And so my process was talking to the people who were talking to me. No, I just wanted to say thank you all for having me, and go on to be world changers.